welcome to another episode of Modern Mom, where we talk about being a mom in the 21st century. Today, I have my guest, Anna Morante, licensed family therapist. Hello.
Hello, Remy.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me and being willing to do the podcast. I'm in Anna's beautiful home today, and we're recording from here. So, you're a licensed family therapist, and recently I actually took your class for the Parenting Without Violence. So now I'm certified in that through you, and you were an amazing teacher.
Oh, thank you.
How long have you been teaching it?
Wow, since 1991?
Okay.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
You do the math.
You clearly know what you're talking about. Me was number one. Obviously, you're very experienced. You are a mother yourself.
Absolutely.
How has your parenting influenced the way that you teach this class?
Well, definitely, I took this class before I even had my daughters. I don't know what I would have done without it. So, my parenting is highly, highly informed by these classes. And at the same time, what I learned from my kids inform me on how to do the classes also differently.
Oh, interesting. What would you say was impacted?
Well, one of the things is I teach a lot about the skill of listening,
Mhm.
and I think it's a very important skill. And I was teaching it for many, many years until one time my daughter gave me a lesson on how to really listen. And I will never forget that lesson. And now I share it with the group
Yes.
on how important it is to not only um, think what your kids' experience is like, but to let them tell you
Mhm.
and hear it from them, even if what they have to say is something that you may not want to hear.
Right. Would you be willing to give an example at all?
Absolutely. So when Ariana, my oldest daughter, was very little, my husband and I had a big conflict, and we were separated for maybe a couple of years
Oh, wow.
while she was little. And thank God during that time we had a lot of support. So his family was supportive, my family was supportive. I had plenty of friends. So in my mind, it's like, okay, parents were, and he was visiting her all the time.
Okay.
So I thought, oh, she did well. She was plenty loved, and everybody around her was crazy about her. So as she was growing up, and we talked about that, I always told her, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. We were separated, but you were fine. You were loved. You had support. And then one day she told me, Mom, I want to go to therapy with you guys.
Mhm.
And it's like, what?
That was a surprise.
And so sure enough, what she told us is that although it's true, everything that I said was true, but in a way, we never made the space for her to tell us how that period in her life, even when she was so small, impacted her.
Okay. Oh, wow. And so she asked for the therapy. She was able to
Yeah,
ask for that.
she did.
She had the space to come to you as parents.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it was maybe the first time that I made space for her to say it and to just validate her feelings
Mhm.
without having to kind of like fix it and tell her, oh, yeah, it was hard and you have support and everything was fine and everybody loved you. Right. So, no, I needed to make space for the pain that she suffered.
Right. Right. And that's so now that you've experienced that yourself, you're able to bring that to the parenting class.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As much as possible, I try to make sure that parents make space for kids
Mhm.
to tell their story their own way, not the way the parent thinks it is.
Right.
I think that's very important.
Yeah. I like so me and my co-parent, we are also divorced and I raise my children and he and I co-parent very well now. We've
Good.
worked very hard to get there. But sometimes my kids will say something that, well, my parents are divorced. And so, I felt the same way that, oh, well, you have plenty of support, his mother is very supportive, my parents are very supportive, but I know that they definitely have experiences that hurt, them, and so that's important for me to hear to, provide them the space to be able to talk about that as well.
Exactly. And sometimes it's hard for us parents because we don't want our kids to suffer
Right.
and we don't want to even admit that maybe something we did was hurtful to them.
Mhm.
But it is necessary for them to be able to speak it, to say it, and especially if they can say it to their own parents.
Mhm.
Because they can say it to somebody else, they can go to therapy and say it.
Right.
But there's a different power when
Mhm.
they can say it to their own parents
Mhm.
and when parents are open to just say,
what you're saying reminds me of a book that I read. I think it was called How to Make Good Things Happen. It's a Spanish author, but it's translated in English. And what she says is that trauma is a two-part event. One is the actual event that happens, but the second part is when people close to you deny that it happened. And that's when it becomes a traumatic memory. Do you have any opinion on that?
Yes, yes. I mean, there's a lot of talk about trauma lately.
Right.
But one of the things that I heard and I believe is trauma is not what happens to you,
Right.
it's how you
Mhm.
perceive it and your ability or not to digest that event.
Okay.
So when you have nobody to talk to, when nobody can validate your experience,
Right.
or when you don't want to share it because it's too hard,
Mhm.
then that's when trauma stays.
Right.
It's the negative event plus the lack of support.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can definitely attest to that even in my own experiences. I had something happen to me that maybe wasn't considered to be a textbook trauma event, but I remember at the time not feeling comfortable to share it with anyone close to me, my parents, and it stayed with me for a decade.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
when I was 18, 10 years later, I finally felt comfortable enough to say this had happened.
Yes.
Yes, and
Yes.
my father very much validated me, and, he kinda said, "Well, I'm gonna make some phone calls and make sure that it's known that this person had done that and made you feel that way at that age,"
Yes.
and that validation just was so healing.
Very important. And
Yeah,
that's very hard for parents to do.
yeah, it can be, especially if they feel
Yes.
responsible, I think,
Absolutely.
because as a parent, that is one thing I learned very early was to be able to acknowledge, apologize, and kind of reprogram my action
Right.
to my
Right.
kids.
Right. I like to call that when there are ruptures, it's
Right.
important that there are repairs.
Yes.
Right. So in my generation, at least, parents were not supposed to show what they did wrong
Right.
because they were afraid that that was going to undermine their authority from then on.
Okay.
Right. So even if they made a mistake, they had to just pretend that everything was okay,
Right.
justify it, or tell the kid, no, it was your problem.
Mm.
But now we are learning that as parents, we are human and we are going to make mistakes.
Right.
And it's very powerful when you're able to own your mistake
Mhm.
or whatever you didn't do the best way and repair it. Ask for forgiveness
Yeah.
and find a way to bring back that closeness.
I love that you said that, the repair, because number 1, like you said, we are human and we are not perfect. Parents are people too. And that's okay, number 1, for us to forgive ourselves and say, okay, I made this mistake, but then come back and also repair
Yes.
with our children.
Otherwise, the kids will always think that whatever happened is their fault
Mhm.
and they're going to take it personally.
Right.
Right? So when you're able to say, no, it was not you, it was me, that
Right.
I was stressed or I was not feeling good or whatever it is, and I'm sorry about that, and I'm gonna make sure that I won't whatever it is that I did, right? Yell at you, hit you, whatever it
Right.
is. I'm gonna work on that. That's also showing the kids that it's okay to take responsibility for your actions.
Right.
Because as
Yes.
kids grow up, they're also gonna make mistakes, right? So it's okay, and actually something good comes
Mhm.
from you assuming responsibility and for making a repair.
Right. It's good for both parent and child.
Absolutely,
Okay, that makes
absolutely.
sense. How long have you been a therapist for?
Oh, 30 years?
Okay.
Yeah.
So long before your daughters were born, or at least a bit before your daughters were born.
Yeah, well, I've been doing kind of like some type of therapy even before I got licensed, but
Okay.
I got licensed right before Ariana was born.
And what led you to that journey?
Wow. Obviously, my own story.
Okay.
So, my parents separated when I was 5.
Mhm.
And so, from then on, I grew up mostly with my mom and my 3 siblings. And as I was growing up, I always was thinking, what does it take to have a happy family?
Mhm.
Because clearly my family was not happy in that
Okay.
time, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So when I was in high school, actually, I my family and I went to a couple of family therapies,
Mhm.
which was really weird because in that time family therapy was not that known.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
especially I'm from Peru,
Mhm.
so that happened in Peru.
Okay.
But hey, we had a family therapist, and that must have left a very good impression in me. So
Right.
from then on, since I was in high school, I knew I wanted to be a therapist.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
so you knew for a long time that this is the industry you wanna be in.
totally.
This is what you wanna do. You wanna help people.
Yes,
Okay. And so
yes.
you must have seen many things throughout the years and generations change. What is the biggest change you've seen from when you started therapy to how things are now that you want to address and
The change that I've seen in my clients.
mhm, in the kind of, the theme, I would say, because 'cause we've gone through a lot, right? We've gone through a
Yes,
pandemic, you
a
know,
lot.
what are some of the things that you themes that you've seen that have changed since you first started therapy 31 years ago?
Some things have changed and others remain the same. So clearly, I mean, after the pandemic, there's been an increase in anxiety in
Okay.
people, depression, insecurity, right,
Mhm,
because of the lack of predictability of what was happening back then.
mhm.
Um, and then also, I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen is the whole thing about social media.
Mm,
Because when I started doing therapy, there was no such a thing as Facebook and
right.
all these social interactions and all that. So socialization was much more like face to face, and dating was very different,
Mhm,
right? So with this whole thing of the internet and social media and all that, um, there is there is a huge change,
mm,
and I still see it also when I see people from different generations.
okay.
So some of my clients, let's say, are in their 50s, 60s, even 70s, and they are more kind of like the old school, the way I was raised,
Right.
right?
This is how we did it back in my day.
Right.
Mhm,
And then I do have clients that are 18, 19, in their
mm,
20s,
okay.
and it's a whole different world.
Okay.
It's like socialization is totally different, dating is totally different.
Mhm,
And there's a whole lot more of this sense of insecurity
interesting. Interesting.
based on how I'm going to see myself
Mhm,
compared to how people present themselves in Instagram or
right,
Facebook or all those platforms, right? Where people tend to show, yeah, the best part of them.
right.
And then people say, well, that's not my life. So,
Mhm. Comparing your insides to other people's outsides.
absolutely.
And I feel
Absolutely.
like that existed before, but now you're saying because social media has skewed the
Totally.
view, it's even gotten deeper,
Yes.
especially with the younger
Yes.
generation.
And I hear more and more that dating is so difficult
Okay, tell me more.
because apparently people in their profiles or when they're online, they're able to say so many things about themselves.
Mhm.
But when they are in person,
Yes,
then it's a totally different story.
right.
I remember a case of a woman who actually was in Venezuela
Mhm.
and she met this guy online. And online, everything was beautiful, and he was so attentive and
Mhm.
listened to her and everything. And so she left everything she had to come
Oh,
here to be with
no.
him.
Okay,
And when she comes over here and they are now face to face,
right.
living day in, day out,
Mhm.
total
Totally
different
different.
story,
Oh my
very
goodness.
withdrawn, very emotionally
Oh,
unavailable.
wow.
And so she was having the hardest time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of sounds like a combination of fantasy, maybe she also created.
Yes, that could be,
Okay.
absolutely. But I also, people, when they are behind the screen
Mhm.
or even texting,
Right.
they're able to say things
Mhm.
with much more ease
Okay.
than when they are like this,
Face to
face
face.
to face.
Right.
This has a level of energy
Mhm.
that requires certain amount of presence, certain amount of energy
Right.
that is not there when you're online,
Okay.
right? So
Yes.
people may not be wanting to deceive each other.
Right.
It's just that online, oh, it's so much easier to text. It's so much easier to
Right.
do that.
Yes.
But now that I have you here in front of me,
I have to give you my
oh,
undivided attention, which is so
yes,
much harder, and every single inflection in my face
that's
can
it.
communicate something positive.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's so funny you say that because number 1, text message. I do wanna talk about that for a moment because people communicate these major communications over text message.
Yes.
I am now under this kind of, policy that other than what time or logistical things, I try not to communicate emotional things over text message.
Beautiful.
And number 2, I always thought of it the opposite way, that over email and text message, there's room for people to interpret it negatively. So
Mm.
over, at work, I've been in corporate. I was in corporate for 15 plus years before I kind of changed my direction. And That's why a lot of people scheduled meetings face to face, because over email, a lot of times things get lost in translation and a communication is interpreted. But what you're saying in dating is that communication is interpreted positively over text and the inflections are
Yes, and
interpreted negatively.
also it could be that when you don't have the person in front of you, you're going to interpret whatever way you want.
Okay.
And if you
Right.
really want to be in a relationship, then you're going to see everything as positive,
Right.
right? Whereas when it's in person, the other thing that happens is if, especially if people have some trauma
Right.
from their childhood,
Yes.
having the person in front of you and
Oh, sorry.
like
Okay.
you said, seeing them, seeing their faces, seeing the inflections,
Right.
just the gesture in their faces, sometimes can trigger memories.
Interesting.
Totally.
There are so many layers to this.
Absolutely. So this face to face has much more room to trigger if
Interesting.
I have some relational trauma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not just that person's projections or that person, what that person is giving out. It's also the person receiving
So,
might be interpreting it a certain
yes.
way.
Yes.
Whereas the text message creates a space to remove that person from the trauma triggers.
Totally. Totally.
That is
Yeah.
so deep.
It is.
It does make dating difficult. So I feel as though I feel as though I've heard all kinds of things right now about, people either dating or not dating or having trouble making connections. But one factor that I've heard about over and over is the changes of women's rights
Uh huh.
in relationships.
Yes.
So before, women didn't have access to bank accounts,
That's true.
weren't able to vote. Now women have this sense of independence.
Yes. They don't have to put up with a lot of stuff just because
Right.
their daily life doesn't depend on it.
Yeah.
Right. On someone
So
else.
what are your thoughts around that and how to either, mitigate cuz if someone wants to be in a relationship but also is financially independent and able to not have to take a lot of things that maybe
Right.
yeah, what are your
Right.
thoughts on that?
I think we have to be very careful with that. In general, of course, I agree that it's so much better for a woman
Right.
to feel that she can be on her own.
Mhm.
Otherwise, sometimes we get into relationships just because that's the best thing that I can do with my
Right.
life,
Mhm.
and I have nothing else going on for me.
Exactly.
And if for whatever circumstances I'm depending financially from my partner.
Right.
If I have a good partner, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
But if my partner has issues and starts taking advantage of that and
Right.
starts wanting to impose his needs over mine just because he's the financial provider,
Right.
then that's very difficult for women
Mhm.
to be able to stand up for themselves and to have a similar room in the relationship, right?
Right. Well, where do we find that balance? Because on one end, someone like Judge Judy says, "Do not be financially dependent on a man because of those
Yes.
reasons."
Yes.
And then on the other side, we've got, very independent, especially financially, but also emotionally, etcetera.
Yes.
And then we have trouble maybe being in a relationship because we don't want to have to put up with a lot
Depend.
of things. Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely. Like again, this is a very complex issue and I think it's person to person.
Yes.
But if anything, I've been raised more on the side of being independent,
Right.
be financially independent.
Okay.
And also because, like I said, when my parents divorced when I was little,
Mhm.
I had the experience that nobody can take care of me emotionally
Right. Okay.
because my dad is gone, my mom is depressed, my grandma
Mhm.
died. So it was like,
Sorry.
I know it was a lot of stuff for a little one.
Yes.
So I knew I don't want to depend on anyone.
Interesting.
Right?
The hyper independence.
Total,
Right.
total. And it's a total defense, right?
Mm.
So I grew up like really strong, really independent and whatever, but only recently, and it's interesting, I've been married for over 30 years. Only recently I'm realizing that I am depriving my husband
Mhm.
from some level of taking care of me,
Okay.
right?
Interesting. You're depriving
And
him.
I'm depriving, and this was a really silly example, but to me it was very interesting to observe.
Okay.
So we went to Southeast Asia in January for our anniversary, our
Mhm.
30th anniversary.
Mhm.
And so we were coming back and we had to take like 2 or 3 planes to come back.
Okay.
And we had like 2 big suitcases and 2 huge backpacks.
Okay.
And I'm so used to traveling by myself. I
Mhm.
travel a lot by myself, carrying my suitcase, my backpack, and
Mhm.
everything, right? So he's there like, "Oh, help, let me help you." And I'm like, no, no, I can do it.
Okay.
And then something clicked inside of me. And it's like, okay, this guy wants really to help me.
Yes.
So I let him walk from place to one end to the other of the airport with the 2 big suitcases, with the 2 backpacks. And I'm like just happy go lucky carrying my water bottle. And I'm like, wow, he is happy doing
Oh,
that.
wow. Okay.
And before I would have not let him.
Yeah.
Right?
I was gonna ask, how did that sit with you at first when he did that and you see him walking with these 2 suitcases and you're holding a water bottle?
It was kind of like 2 sides.
Okay.
On one side, it's like, yay, this is wonderful, right? But on the other hand, I recognize like how many areas in our life together
Right.
I have acted so independently
Mhm.
that I have deprived him from the opportunity to give more in
Mhm.
the relationship.
Okay.
So I think if anything, that is a little bit of a risk
Okay.
when we don't have balance,
Mhm.
when women want to be too independent,
Right.
right? So it's like, I don't need you for anything.
Mhm.
I'm totally fine, right? And also, it in a way, sometimes kind of like it gives us a little bit less of a, let me see the word that I'm trying to look for, kind of like desire
Mm.
to work things out,
Okay.
right? Because if I'm so independent and I don't need you for anything, and this relationship is not working out,
Mm.
I'm on my own. I don't
Right.
need you. I'm out,
Yes.
right? Now, it's not that I need to depend on you so I can work things out,
Right.
but a little bit of balance, right? So
Mhm.
even if I don't depend on my partner financially,
Mhm.
but if this relationship is important, I need to be willing to go through the difficult moments of the relationship
Right.
without saying, oh, I don't need you. I'm out of here because I'm independent.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I definitely it doesn't matter what relationship it is because whether you stay with your person or divorce them, you still end up needing to work on a relationship with them.
100%.
I find with my co-parent, I have really excellent kind of communication uh, space for communication with him, where whenever we need to update a schedule or something, hey, is this a good time to talk about this? And then we find a time, we have our calendars in front of each other, and then we talk to each other about the schedule as many times as we need to in order to gain clarification. And just because we're not together in a intimate relationship anymore does not take that away, from that part of the relationship.
Sometimes, not always, but sometimes that makes it easier
Okay. Okay, say
because,
more.
yes, because if you're in a relationship and let's say the couplehood is not working out well,
Right.
then that will interfere with our ability to parent the kids.
Right.
But let's say if you were able to work out
Yes.
your separation, right, and
Mhm.
say we are better together, I mean, we're better separately than together
Correct.
as a couple,
Mhm.
right? So that takes away a layer of expectation from the other person.
Ah,
And you are more free to just focus on each other as co parents
okay.
than we are co parenting our kids, but you're also my partner, and I need this
Right.
from you, and you're not giving it to me. And
Right.
there's all kinds of resentments.
Resentment.
So that sometimes that makes it harder.
So for couples who are considering, because there are a lot out there, I know, and they're wanting to work on the relationship, but in the meantime don't want the kids to suffer.
Mm.
Do you have any tips or advice for that?
Yeah. Again, I hate to say this, but this is what I'm saying. It depends on the case.
Right.
It can be very complicated. I have seen a lot of families that stay together for the sake of the kids,
Right.
but they cannot stand being together.
And the kids don't benefit.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And even if they're not fighting, right? But the environment where two people are really not liking each other,
The
for not
tension.
saying hating each other,
Right.
kids know, kids feel,
Oh, yeah.
and that's not a good environment for them,
Right.
right? So, but I've also been a family court counselor. So
Mhm.
sometimes people have such a hard time separating emotionally
Mhm.
from the conflict of their relationship
Mhm.
that even if they are separated, they still cannot get over their own personal hurt
Mm.
and they use the kids
Oh, no.
as pawns to
Yes.
get to the other parent
Yes.
because the couple relationship is messy and it hasn't been fully worked out, and there's so many resentments left there.
That's so unfortunate.
It is. It is. And a lot of kids are trapped in that very, very negative cycle.
Yeah, so the thing about kids, in my opinion, my very limited opinion, because I don't know if you knew this about me, but I'm actually running for school board
Oh
for
no, I
my
didn't
yeah,
know.
so for Cupertino
Oh,
Union School District. And one of the things that I think I can bring to the table, in my opinion, is the fact that I've kind of undergone a lot of these things.
yes.
And so I can represent the parts of the community that are not picket fence.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
good.
And so, being able to understand and undergo that process and really, come to a point where me and my co-parent prioritize the children
Beautiful.
and really, kind of come. But you're right. I mean, if there's a lot of excessive conflict, the children can be used as pawns, like you said. So for parents, how can they recognize when they're in that emotion? How can they recognize and separate? Because it's so difficult, especially in that heat of that resentment.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
That's the part of self care.
Right.
And that's the part where some people really need a little bit of deeper help,
Mhm.
right? Therapy or something. But one of the most important tools I always say is before you act, stop
Mhm.
and notice what's happening within you.
Okay.
Stop and notice and see what's going on, how am I feeling,
Mhm.
and what is this feeling about, right?
Right.
So if it's something that I am holding a resentment against my partner,
Mhm.
then at least just that stopping and recognizing will give me a little bit of space
Mhm.
so that when I have to relate to my kids, I can be in a better space for them,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. So that's the thing about being a single parent is making sure that I can ask for help and support.
Yes. And we need it. We
Yes.
need it.
Yeah, so I'm really grateful that I have a support system. So I was telling you I'm running, and one of the things that the I was talking to someone about it today, and she was asking, "Oh, okay, you're a single mom. Do you have the support?" Right? And and I know it's not just financial; it's also just like the emotional support.
Totally.
So, and you mentioned self care as well. So I want to take a moment to talk about and end with kind of, the self-care, parental self-care, support, community, and how all that kind of contributes to the well-being of children as well.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Yeah,
And it is true in this culture, in our society. It's kind of like a high expectation of what to be a mom.
right,
It's all about, and you have to give it all to your kids. I'm from the Latino culture. In our culture, it's like you're a mom first, then you're
right.
a wife, then you're for everybody else in your family, and
Mhm.
very rarely do
And
you have
career
yourself.
is very low on that.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. In
Ambitions is
some
even
parts,
lower.
in some parts of the culture,
Yeah.
right? Right. So the issue is when you're giving, 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 and you
Mhm.
don't pay attention to yourself,
Right.
then the risk is that just like a car that doesn't have gas,
Mhm.
you can have a wonderful car, but if it doesn't have gas, it's not going to go anywhere,
Right.
right? So if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't make space for our needs, to relax,
Right.
to recharge our batteries, then we may be physically present,
Mhm.
but we're going to be irritable or tired or disengaged.
No, I'm okay.
So, so I would say that self care piece is critical
Right.
because also we're modeling for our kids,
Yes.
right? If we're just constantly going and giving and giving and giving and nothing in return, that's what they're going to learn as well.
Yeah, like a sense of codependency almost.
Yes, yes, yes. And in some cases, also is some level of entitlement to the kids,
Right.
right? Oh,
Oh,
my mom does
interesting.
everything for me, so I
Right.
don't have to worry about it, and I'm expecting her to always do it,
Right.
right? Versus, hey, my mom also has needs, and
Right.
sometimes I have to accommodate to her needs, not
Yes.
her to my needs all the time.
Oh, that's good to hear because I
Yes.
feel like I definitely am different from my mother's generation, where she was very much just very focused on the nurturing of the children. And I will nurture, but for example, the other day, my kids, and I get this because I did this as a kid too, they were listening to a song over and over and they were dancing to it, which is great. I needed to take space because I felt overstimulated. And so I went into the other room and my daughter came in after me after a few minutes and I said, I feel really overstimulated right now. I need space. When I'm ready, I'm going to come out again. But for now, I need to take my space. And so she heard me
Beautiful.
very clearly, and she, left the room, and she closed my door, and she gave me that space I needed, and then, when I was
Awesome.
ready to be a mom again.
That's it. That's it. Because many times when we don't take care of ourselves, we're not ready to be moms.
Right,
We are in a constant reactive mode.
right.
And that's one of the things I've been teaching parenting classes forever and ever and ever. And one of the things that I hear over and over from especially the moms is like, I don't have patience.
Right,
Patience, patience, patience. Where are you going to get the patience from
right.
if you
If you're not
are
caring.
running yourself totally ragged and
Absolutely.
there's no room for your needs?
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally promote, self-care. I think it's really important. It's been important for me. I, like to have my own ambitions. Even though I am a, mother, I don't want the motherhood to be the be all end all for myself. It's nice to talk to another woman who also values, career and being of service and things like that. Thank you so much for being on the show today and for providing your beautiful insight. I really appreciated having you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, Remy. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I want to emphasize before we finish,
Yes.
because I think this is very important, is I think it's really critical for moms to have the space to be themselves and to talk about whatever is happening in their own motherhood journey, and feel that they're going to be heard, supported, and not criticized,
I love that.
right? Uh, I'm an IFS therapist now, so internal family systems, and we talk a lot about different parts of ourselves
Okay.
and how important it is for us to be aware when one of those parts is up,
Mhm.
right? So I do have some clients that tell me, right now, I hate being a mom.
Mhm.
I just want to get away from my kids. I cannot stand them and all that. And it's wonderful that they can have a space for
Mm.
them to say that.
Yes.
And some of them says, I don't even dare to say that to my friends
Right.
because they're going to criticize me. They're going to think what kind of mom I am.
Right.
And I think probably most of the moms have felt that way
Oh,
one
yeah.
time or another, right? And these are just parts of us. It doesn't mean that we're bad moms,
Yes.
right? But to have that space where I can really tell someone else and they can get me that right now I just want my kids as far away as possible from me.
Yeah.
It's a total normal feeling.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that I'm not a good mom or I don't care about my kids.
Mhm.
It's just that in this moment, like you said, I need that space.
Right.
I need that space for me to recharge, and then I can come back and be loving
Exactly.
for you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for reiterating that. That's very important.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us on another episode of Modern
Thank
Mom,
you.
and we will see you real soon. Thank you again.